Dober dan vsem skupaj, dobrodošli na pogovoru o slovenskem gostovanju na Frankfurtskem knjižnem sejmu prihodnje leto. Tale pogovor smo organizirali zelo na hitro, ker enostavno nismo vedeli, ali bo imel gospod Bos čas za njega ali ne. Zato ga tudi ni bilo v tiskani napovedi programa in zato tudi nismo uspeli zagotoviti pravega moderatorja za ta pogovor. Tako da sem v to vlogo skočil jaz, ki imam od nas tri največ novinarskih izkušenj. Moje ime je sicer Miha Kovač in sem kurator, eden od treh skrbnikov in kreatorjev programa slovenskega programa na letošnjem knjižnem sejmu v Frankfurtu prihodnje leto. Ta pogovor bo potekal v dveh jezikih. Z gospodom Boosom se bova pogovarjala v angleščini. Če kdo želi prevod, so tamle zadaj na voljo slušalke in bo pač njegovi odgovori in moja vprašanja prevedena. Z Katjo Strgar, v.d. direktorice Jaka, se bova pa seveda pogovarjala v slovenščini. Juergen, I'm switching to English now. Can you say just in a few sentences, because some people here might not know, what exactly is Frankfurt Book Fair when there is no global pandemics and when there is no war in Ukraine, and what exactly is the role of guest of honor in all this?
Thank you. The Frankfurt Book Fair, the Frankfurter Buchmesse, dates back to the 15th century. So actually we survived many pandemics and many wars. And actually the book fair started before there were printed books in Germany, because storytelling always needed a marketplace where you could deal with manuscripts, even if they were written by monks. Yeah? So you had this marketplace, and it started in Germany at Mainz, where actually Gutenberg invented printing, yeah, with a typesetting. And the book fair moved immediately from Mainz to Frankfurt, because Mainz was the seat of a bishop. So there was censorship, religious censorship in Mainz, and Frankfurt was a free city which belonged to the emperor, and it was a city of trade. So actually, this goes back 500 years, that storytelling needs a marketplace to distribute books. And in the later, 100 years ago, it started about immaterial books. It's all about rights, translation rights. And so Frankfurt in the turn of the centuries became the most prominent hub to deal with rights, language rights, and in the past 20 years it's audiobook rights, it's film rights, it's games, which also play an important role for our industry. And it's became the most prominent marketplace, and not even China ever surpassed Frankfurt, which I think it's quite interesting, since publishing is a very European tradition, and we always lived in this tradition. And Frankfurt, as I said, it's the largest marketplace in its kind, but it's also a festival, like the book fair here. It's to celebrate books. So in 2019, we had about 300,000 people attending, about half of them book professionals from 140 countries all over the world. So we play a very, very important role in the world of book publishing. There are other marketplaces. There's a Bologna, which is very important for children book publishing. There's London, which is important for English language rights. But Frankfurt does have to deal with everything in the world of publishing. And we started having a focus in the 70s. We decided to have a language, a cultural region, a country actually to become our focus point. And at that, in the 70s, we started curating ourselves. We, the book fair people, started curating, and we said we are going to invite writers from Africa, and we called it Black Africa, Schwarz Afrika. You couldn't say that anymore. Yeah, we decided to have a focus point on religion. You couldn't do this anymore. Can you imagine the fights we would have? And we realized in the early 80s what we are doing is colonial. So we changed the concept of the guest of honor, and we said we invite somebody who has very interesting authors, who has an interesting culture, who is looking forward into the future to present themselves in Frankfurt, not only with his authors, not only with the books, but also all aspects of culture, theater, film, paintings, whatever you can name. The German Architecture Museum is based in Frankfurt. So we try to cover everything. And it's not only an event, but it's a process to be guest of honor. It needs us 3 years to prepare it, and the core of it is a translation funding program. So we try to support publishers to sell their rights into German or other languages, and the guest of honor is supporting this by financing the translations. And this is very important because people don't see it. They just see 5 days in October in Frankfurt, but actually it's like 3 years preparation time, get books translated. It's a year in Frankfurt or in Germany with the exposure to these people from 140 countries. And then it's another 4 to 5 years. We built up a network in these 3 years. Yeah? I could go on and on and on. I don't want to talk too much. But it's very important for us to have Slovenia in Frankfurt.
But what exactly are the audiences for guest of honor? I mean, you said that there are many things going on before the fair, and then during the fair, first 2 days of the Frankfurt are just professional, and then general public gets in. What do usually guests of honors do in all this?
So the guest of honor, actually, one thing I spoke about, the translation funding, which is the backbone of it. But then there's a dedicated hall for the guest of honor where they can present their authors or whatever they would like to present. We don't interfere, we just advise. So now we had Spain this year. Spain is here at the stand over there as well, which is nice because we've seen Drago Janča becoming a friend with Manuel Rivas. So actually it's about networking and becoming friends. And this is happening in this pavilion. And it's actually, you can present your authors, there are many stages. There usually is a coffee shop, but there's all other arts of intellectual presentations. And it's food does play a very important role. Gastronomy can play an important role. There's films to be shown in the German Film Museum, but also on the fairground. There's discussions, mostly about intellectual property, but there's also, which is in the past 20 years became more and more important, there's a lot of political discussions. And Frankfurt, if you have people from 140 nations coming to Frankfurt and they identify themselves, national identity, language is a symbol of national identity. Yeah? And if you question that, so you have very interesting discussions. And right now we have a lot of discussions about minorities all over the world. We have gender discussions. And this is also very important to showcase what's happening in your society, in the guest of honor society. That's what you bring to Frankfurt. Actually, to stimulate, we have, in these 5 days, we have about 10,000 journalists coming in. Yeah, 10,000 journalists from all over the world, and they all focus, 60% of the articles which are published are on the guest of honor. So it's really a huge stage, and it will be very exciting to see how Slovenia is going to use this stage, how the authors are going to use this stage, how diverse it's going to be, how challenging it's going to be.
Okay, I mean, you've seen quite a few guests of honor, I assume more than 20. What would you say would be an indicators of guest of honor success?
First of all, that you could think about numbers. And numbers, I mean, how many titles get translated, because then you can measure the interest of the publishing world into these titles. But actually German as a language plays a certain role, at least in Europe, because we have the largest book market in Europe. So if a title gets translated into German, all the other countries would look into it and see if this is going to be a success, then they would translate it as well. So I'm speaking of these 7 years, yeah? So you see, if the years after Frankfurt, you see a lot more translations from Slovenian into other language. This is very important. And so you could measure success by the numbers, but I think more important is this, if you come back the next year and you're still interested in Slovenia, as a reader or as a book professional, as a translator, as a cultural person. I have here my friend sitting from the Goethe Institute here in Ljubljana, and if you can create this atmosphere that we want to know more about Slovenia. This is more qualitative, it's not quantitative to measure. But you will find out by the voices you have to talk to and you have to listen to. And I think this is a success. If you can feel an international interest in Slovenia, even if you see more tourists coming. Could be an outcome of it. But this is not important. Yeah? More important is that you build up a network which is going to last for many years.
One of very common debates or most often asked questions in Slovenia is what is the cost of all this? So do you have any idea what would be the average cost of, let's say, last 10 guests of honor, and where the hell does all this money go?
Years ago, actually, when I started, I think it was about the time I started in 2005, I think 2007, we had the Catalan culture. And I think they spent, and I'm looking to my colleague Simone down there, somewhere between 15 to 20 million euros. And this is 15 years ago. Yeah? On the other hand, we had Iceland as guest of honor. You can imagine 320,000 people living in Iceland. But everybody's a writer, or at least he pretends to be a writer, or a musician. Yeah, Björk, you name it. Everybody's an artist, and he's a writer, musician, and a painter as well. And we had the financial crisis at this point of time, and we also had the volcano erupting. And they had a budget, I think, of 3 million euros, and the loss during the financial crisis 1.5 million. And they couldn't bring any money because the banking system didn't work anymore. So actually the person in charge, he had a little suitcase with some money in it, and he had to pay everything in cash. And Iceland was one of our most successful. Yeah? So it's not about the money, yeah? Because as I said, the money goes into translation funding, goes into the authors, goes into the Slovenian publishers, supports other publishers translated. I think this is the most important point. And on the other hand, I think it's a lot of passion. Passion in a positive sense, but also passion that it's a challenge. Yeah? How do I want to be seen? And this is a process which takes place here in Slovenia. You have to decide, Katja and your colleagues, you have to decide how we want to be seen. What is the uniqueness of Slovenian literature? What is the uniqueness of Slovenian culture? Yeah? And this is, I think, one of the biggest challenges at all.
Okay, so this might be a good occasion to shift to Katja and to Slovene, and so you have to put your earphones on. Katja, jaz bom kar nadaljeval tukaj, kjer je Jürgen nehal. Kje smo glede budžeta?
Ja, država se je odločila, da je nastop na Frankfurtskem sejmu za Slovenijo res pomemben projekt, zato nas država podpira. Se pravi, načeloma je naš budžet za vsa ta leta 6 milijonov evrov, od tega 4,5 iz kohezijskih sredstev in 1,5 milijona iz sredstev državnega proračuna. Ampak prepričana sem, da glede na to, da smo se odločili, da bomo ta nastop izvedli dobro, da bomo, če bo potrebno, tukaj dobili še dodatna sredstva, ki jih bomo pa seveda skušali najbolje možno uporabiti, zato da bomo pridobili to vidnost in odličen nastop na sejmu v Frankfurtu.
Okay, drugače tole smo si zamislili tudi kot neke vrste odprto tiskovno konferenco, tako da po tem vprašanju naslednjem bom vprašal vas za vprašanja. Morate pa vsi govoriti v mikrofon zaradi prevoda. Mikrofone boste pa dobili tamle nekje iz ozadja. Aha, ne iz ozadja, ampak iz skrajne desne oziroma iz vaše skrajne leve. Še eno vprašanje, Katja. Kje smo glede ekipe in glede programa?
Glede programa, to je stvar, ki me v bistvu najmanj izmed vsega skrbi. Jaz priznam, da imam neizmerno zaupanje v kakovost naših avtorjev, ilustratorjev in nasplošno naše kulture in pa tudi zaupanje v vas tri kuratorje, v tebe, Miha, v Amalijo Maček in Matijasa Görica, ker mislim, da nastaja v vaših ali pa v naših skupnih rokah res nek kakovosten program in da so tudi tuje založbe se v preteklih letih in v sedanjih letih odločale za avtorje in pač za naše kulturne projekte, ki so lahko zanimivi res in pridobijo nek odmev, ki ga bomo potem lahko uporabili res še tudi v prihodnjih letih. Jaz sama vidim, da je prav na teh razpisih za podporo prevodom v zadnjih letih vedno več zanimanja, da ne govorim, da se vedno več prijavljajo tudi izjemno kakovostne založbe, ne samo iz Nemčije, ampak tudi iz drugih držav, hkrati pa, da naša literatura prodira tudi v države, ki si morda nikoli nismo mislili. Drugače pa glede ekipe na Javni agenciji za knjigo, tu zagotovo ni skrivnost, da smo podhranjeni, da bomo v zelo kratkem morali ekipo okrepiti in profesionalizirati, ker pač potrebujemo ljudi, ki bodo znali odlično opravljati delo na področju PR-ja in marketinga, ki bodo seveda s tem spet poskrbeli za to, da bomo v tujini vidni in da bomo naša sredstva, ki jih investiramo v projekt, čim bolj oplemenitelj, da bodo naše založbe imele rezultate in izkupiče iz tega v prihodnjih letih. Hkrati pa seveda moramo tudi kakšnega produktnega vodjo še dodatno upeljati v ekipo, ki bo sodeloval pri organizaciji in logistiki, namreč tukaj zadaj je en kup stvari, ki jih je treba speljati zato, da potem, ko smo na odru, ko so naši avtorji prisotni, ko potekajo razstave, da so stvari izpeljane tako, kot morajo biti. Ne? In seveda ne govorimo samo o dogodkih v tistem tednu v Frankfurtu, ampak dogodkih, ki se odvijajo v bistvu že od letošnjega Frankfurta dalje. Prav zdaj so kolegice odpeljale knjige na sejem na Dunaju, kjer bo tudi nekaj nastopov slovenskih avtorjev. Skratka, vse to so dogodki, ki so predhodnica ali pa konjenica za potem tiste glavne nastope v Frankfurtu.
Kakšno vprašanje? Ja, tamle.
Hello, Meta Česnik, Slovi National Television. You mentioned, Mr. Boss, that you don't interfere how the guest of honor is all the procedures, right? And that you just advise, but still somehow you also have to take care for the dignity of this important brand, right? So maybe can you tell us, Katja just mentioned what is happening in Slovenia, maybe can you mention similar problems, or maybe some countries have sweet problems, some countries have not so sweet problems. What would you say, where are we, and what is maybe an advice to us? Thank you.
Yeah, we have quite some experience. As I said, we started in the late 70s and then transformed it and reinvented it in the late 80s. And we've seen very successful events, and we've seen countries spending so much money. We had Brazil as guest of honor. It was such an impressive presentation, but immediately after the event, the National Book Institute got closed. So there was no follow-up, which was a big disaster. Yeah, they spent 20 million and it went away. Yeah? And this was very disappointing for us. When we had the Catalan culture, which I mentioned, they spent a lot of money, but during the preparation time, I think I've seen 5 ministers of culture in 3 years. Yeah? And every time the next Minister of Culture became, let's say, more conservative, and then they had the decision the year before the guest of honor to only bring authors to Frankfurt which would write in Catalan. Yeah? The most prominent authors from Catalonia would have written in Spanish. Yeah? So this was a big mistake, and we had a huge discussion about nationalism in Europe. Yeah? So this wasn't the objective of the guest of honor. We wanted to show diversity. We didn't want to show the national ideas of Catalonia at that time. On the other hand, I mentioned Iceland, which was very successful because it was such a small country. They really had to focus what's happening in Iceland. And they tried to show what's happening during a long winter in Iceland. The living room where people sit and read. Very, very simple idea. Yeah? And what I liked about Slovenia when we started discussing whether this would be interested, and I said it's always about the uniqueness of a language, of writers. And we looked into Slovenian literature, and we've seen all these poets. So it's a lot about poetry. This is something very special in Slovenia. Yeah, and this is something which I really would want you to showcase. Yeah, and I just received this book, which is a Langgedicht by Boris Novak, and this is just parts of it. So there are going to be more volumes, and this is an excerpt in English. So because the other, how many pages? I don't know, thousands of pages I won't be able to read. But actually, who dares to write a Langgedicht heutzutage, these days, yeah? Who spends 20 years writing a poem? And this is quite impressive, and I think we need to show this.
Še kakšno vprašanje? Potem bomo spet eno vprašanje zate. Kje smo, zdaj frankfurtski program, kot je že Juergen omenil, se deli na knjižnega in neknjižnega nekako. Kje smo s tem?
Ja, tudi tukaj so stvari, jaz bi rekla, že kar daleč, pa še vedno tudi v tistem stanju, da ne bi stvari zelo konkretizirali. Dogovarjamo se za nekaj pomembnih razstav v mestu Frankfurt v času sejma, hkrati v Leipzigu tudi že maja za razstavo, to morda res lahko že omenimo, ali rajše mogoče ne. Potem hkrati se bodo dogajali tudi stvari na področju filma, vključena bodo tudi sosednja mesta, recimo Wiesbaden, kjer se bodo dogajale filmske stvari. Govorimo o predstavitvah tako sodobnih slovenskih umetnikov, kot pa tudi predstavitvah, razstavah, ki bodo predstavljale določene slovenske avtorje, ki so recimo bili tudi v preteklosti del nemškega področja. Skratka, za vse skupaj govorimo tudi o pomembnih koncertih, ki se bodo zgodili v času naše predstavitve v Frankfurtu. Zagotovo pripravljamo tudi nastope zelo odmevnih slovenskih skupin, ki naj bi se predstavljale tik pred začetkom Frankfurta, in pa tudi dogodke na manjših odrih, kjer bomo prisotni. To je zdaj, govorim tako malce o zagonetkah, ampak dokler nimamo potrjenih zares vseh točnih lokacij in točnih datumov, je nehvaležno omenjati posamezne nastopajoče, če se stvari lahko še precej spremenijo. Medtem ko morda na literarnem polju smo precej bolj gotovi, da vemo, da bo poezija eden izmed zagotovo naših fokusov, ker je ta stvar nespregledljiva. Potem ne bomo spustili niti izjemno pomembnih slovenskih avtorjev z področja filozofije, seveda sodobnega slovenskega romana. Predstavljena bo tudi žanrska literatura, ker je pač to stvar, ki med drugim pritegne veliko bralcev. Govorili bomo tudi, poseben sklop je namenjen predstavitvi pomena branja v sodobnem času in pa tudi učbeniških gradiv. Zagotovo bomo tudi en pomemben del predstavitev namenili kulinariki, ker je to spet ena stvar, ki je svetovno izjemno odmevna in kjer je na sejmu prostor, da si takšno predstavitev tudi zagotovimo.
Okay. One more question for you. You mentioned that at the book fair there are also discussions about political issues. What do you mean by that? Should we quarrel about our issues or should we do something else?
I think, Micha, you can't control this. What's going to happen? The thing is, publishing by itself, I think it's political, because if you think of the novel is always about an individual person who's struggling with society, or with his place in society, or asks philosophical questions. Where do I come from? Where do I go to? Yeah, so it's always a person. Yeah, it's on the one hand, it's a person behind the books, it's the author, but when you read a book, you might read a completely different book than the intention of the author was. So this is more, let's say, a philosophical question, but things become immediately political if you think of this. Yeah. What am I struggling with right now in my society? We're seeing the war, in Ukraine. Yeah, we see wars all over the world. Yeah, we see how countries like India are closing more and more the borders. Yeah, China is on a different planet now. We used to have hundreds of Chinese publishers in Frankfurt. They were not able to travel. We decided early not to have a Russian presence from the national stand in Frankfurt. Yeah, we didn't have an Iranian stand this year. So you can see on a geopolitical level, but you can also see what's happening with minorities, what's happening with the Sinti and Roma. Are they reflected in our culture? They are not. They are excluded right now. There's gay people being excluded. The winner of the German Book Award is a gender fluid person. So we have to shine the light on that. Maybe 10 years ago, we always thought we are just a stage, and everybody can use this stage. And these people from 140 countries all bring their own issues. And it's a safe harbor. We can meet and we discuss all these issues, what's happening all over the world, what's happening in literature, what's happening with the human beings. But now I see we have to curate a lot more. So a book fair is a place where we have a certain point of view, and this is all about freedom to publish. As long as it's not against laws in Germany, we would allow everybody to speak up in Frankfurt. And this is important to show diversity and maybe even to show conflicts, or where there could be conflicts. And we need to listen to each other. And that's a very difficult thing right now. If you've been following Elon Musk and Twitter and all these discussions right now, everybody's speaking 140 signs with an exclamation mark. People don't speak with question marks anymore. Because nobody's listening. And this is something we try to focus on in Frankfurt right now. We want to bring the listening back. And this is very important, that next year we will see that we have an audience, and we have other publishers, translators, people from all the world, even politicians, to listen to the voices from Slovenia. And I also want to mention one thing which is very important to me. It's not a one-way street. We want to bring German authors to Slovenia as well in this year. So it's all about these people behind the books and bring them together and maybe create new friendships, like Manuel Rivas was talking to Drago Janča at the handover in October.
Še kakšno vprašanje? Okay, če njega imam jaz. One more question for you. I mean, the world of books and the world of media is changing enormously fast. So, where do you see the future of the fair? Because this is something what interests all of us who are involved in book business. How do you think you're obviously the right person to ask this. How do you see that the book fair will evolve? Will it stick to books, or will it move in the direction of a kind of content fair or whatever?
Content fair sounds a bit negative, What I believe, it's going to be a marketplace for storytelling. And stories can be told in many ways, But it will always be under the focus of books. 15, 20 years, I was still in publishing. All I did was building pricing models for electronic books and magazines. So I spent like 2 years of my life thinking about how we would deal with electronic books and journals. And actually this went away completely. 10 years ago, electronic books had a market share of about 24% in the United States. Now it's in literature, it's below 7%. On the other hand, we are seeing all of this audiobook streaming. So people subscribe now. They're paying €9 for subscription every month, and they have access to books all over the world. And this audiobook streaming is going through the roof. But it's still storytelling. And people still have to sell this. And also we have, which is an issue with that, because the author gets very little if he gives his content to the audiobook streaming. So we have to protect the rights of the authors as well. So yes, we see a lot of changes, but all of this, I would say, if you call it industry, the book industry relies on trust. If you sell your rights into the digital world, if you sell your rights into another language, you don't know what's going to happen with it. Is it a translation worthwhile? Is there a quality? Do they leave a chapter out? In the past 100 years, we've seen so many things the people adapted novels by translating it. They changed the content, really, in these translations. Or We've seen so many things, so it's all about trust. Or if you sell a book, 5,000 copies, a print run, and then this publisher prints 50,000 copies, yeah, you wouldn't know it. So it's all about trust, and I've never seen a way to build up trust through a computer screen. It's about meeting in person. So I think Frankfurt is very important. A place like this is very important because it's all about the people behind the stories.
Morda sem pozabila eno stvar omeniti, ki se mi zdi tukaj res zelo pomembna, pa jo je zdaj Juergen nekoliko načel, prevajalci. Za slovensko literaturo je seveda prevajanje eden izmed bistvenih stvari, da dobimo to vidnost, da smo prisotni na tujih trgih in zato bodo tudi prevajalci res pomemben del našega programa, njihovo delo in pa povezovanje prek jezikov. Zaradi tega so tudi vsi naši programi, ki so namenjeni spodbujanju prevajanja, s podporo prevajanju in pa z različnimi seminarji za izobraževanja, ena izmed bistvenih stvari, ki jo bomo ves ta čas promovirali. Tukaj jaz samo upam, da bomo lahko na Javni agenciji za knjigo ohranili ali pa še dodatno okrepili ta program spodbujanja prevodov tudi v letu po Frankfurtu, zato da bomo te rezultate dogodkov v Frankfurtu lahko želi kasneje in da bodo res slovenski založniki imeli tudi nekaj od tega.
I'm moving back to you from politics and technology to more pleasant and down-to-earth issues. You said that culinary program is a very important part of Frankfurt, and this is something what is, I think, not quite well known here. So can you say a few words about this?
Yeah, because again, I think culinary is also part of an identity of a language. Yeah, and you can define your culture also by food, and I think this is very important. How to deal with this, and actually, cookbooks are one of the most translated books. On the one hand, it's easy because you have a lot of photos. On the other hand, people all around the world are so much interested in all aspects of cooking that it's a business in itself. So you can see it as a business idea, yeah, to bring your food, to define on the one hand your identity by cooking, but on the other hand you can sell it to the world. And I think this makes it very important. In the past, till 2019, we had a huge kitchen, a show kitchen on the fairground, yeah, where we only presented different ways of cooking. When we had now Spain as guest of honor, they had a dedicated restaurant and food stands and places in Frankfurt where you could get your paella, yeah, which is somehow a cliche, but on the other hand, people don't know about that this is also part of our culture, as it is language, as it is film, theater, ballet, whatever you name it.
Spet sprašujem, če je kakšno vprašanje. Katja, ti si že prej govorila o prevajalcih pa o prihodnosti post-frankfurtske Slovenije. V tem bomo imeli v petek post-frankfurtske slovenske knjižne krajine, da ne bom preveč bombastičen. V tem bomo imeli v petek ob enih tudi neko ob dveh okroglo mizo. Ampak vseeno te sprašujem, kako vidiš slovensko knjižno politiko po Frankfurtu? Kaj bi bilo treba narediti, da ne bomo vsega tega, okrog česar se trudimo zdaj, vrgli stran?
Ja, ena izmed bistvenih stvari je zagotoviti dovolj velik proračun. Proračun Javne agencije za knjigo, ki bo omogočila, da bomo lahko spodbujali tuje založbe, še vedno, da bodo prevajale naše knjige, da bodo tiskale naše knjige, hkrati pa res ena izmed pomembnih stvari je ohranjati to izobraževanje tujih prevajalcev. Eden izmed pomembnih faktorov je tudi Center za slovenščino kot drugi oziroma tuji jezik, ki z lektorati in študijem slovenščine omogoča prisotnost slovenščine v izobraževalnem procesu v 58 državah sveta. Se pravi, tukaj ima država sama po sebi tudi zelo veliko vlogo v tem, da slovenščina je prisotna in da lahko dobimo prevajalce. Ne? In pa seveda omogočiti tudi slovenskim založbam, da imajo zaposlene pri sebi ljudi, ki se ukvarjajo eksplicitno s prodajo pravic v tujino, ker to je izjemno zahtevno delo, ki ga ne zmore in ne zna vsak. Hkrati pa seveda tudi ohraniti sredstva za mobilnost avtorjev, založnikov, skratka, da se ta mreženja ohranijo in zaradi Frankfurta tudi krepijo. Hkrati seveda v letu po Frankfurtu sledi pol leta kasneje tudi slovensko častno gostovanje v Bologni, ki ga je seveda tudi izjemno smiselno izkoristiti za ta efekt snežne kepe. Zagotovo seveda bo treba tudi na javni agenciji ohraniti saj del ekipe, ki se ukvarja z mednarodnim delom, ampak ob tem ne smemo pozabiti, da če slovensko založništvo v Sloveniji ne bo imelo dovolj močne podpore za obstoj, za svoje delo, potem tudi prevodov ne bo, ker ne bo novih knjig. In če ima slovensko založništvo sredstva, ga imajo tudi slovenski avtorji, da potem pišejo, skratka, denar igra zelo veliko vlogo pri tem, kaj lahko narediš in kakšni so rezultati.
Čeprav denar ni vse, kot vemo.
Absolutno ni vse, ampak jaz mislim, da delati znamo in vemo, kako doseči določene rezultate. Jaz mislim, da pač v to, da bodo avtorji pisali dobre tekste, da bodo ilustratorji delali dobre knjige. Jaz nimam dvoma in da tudi slovenski založniki znajo opravljati svoje delo. To se mi ne zdi problematično, ampak ta povezava s tujino, so pa sredstva vseeno kar pomembna. Večina svetovnih držav, kjer nimajo največjih svetovnih jezikov, podpira prevajanje v tuje jezike, podpirajo promocijo svoje literature v tujini, tudi pač z nastopi na sejmih ali pa s tem, kar sem že omenila, podpornimi programi.
Okay, one more question for you. One of the issues which we will have in Frankfurt is how to make our events visible. When I checked the other guest of honor countries, I saw that on a yearly basis, when the year is, let's say, normal, if something like that exists, there is around 4,000 events at the time of Frankfurt Book Fair in all event areas. And we will have around 200 tops. And this means that we will have to fight for visibility. And here we have a few cunning plans. Obviously, we will do some scandals, which I will not explain you in detail. And we will try to do a lot of PR, but what would be your advice?
Actually, it's not about the scandals. Scandals
It's always about the scandals.
No, it's not. Because scandals are not really sustainable. It's for the moment and then it's gone again. And what you want to achieve through this presence in Frankfurt, through this process you're going through for several years, and it's complicated enough, actually, is that you have the network already in place, that other people are going to speak about your events because you've been talking beforehand. So it's not about creating a sensation, it's hard work in the preparation. That's what it's about. That your German publishers, your French, your Spanish publishers actually are proud to have a title translated from Slovenia, and they would do the promotion for that. It's not up to you to do the promotion. The work has to be done now, before Frankfurt, and then you have the multiplicators, people who talk about Slovenia on all these fields. Even if you have a chef like Anna Roche maybe coming to Frankfurt and she talks about how she became one of the best chefs in the world, she's going to do the promotion. And that's the idea. It's about the people. It's not about creating scandals. It's about using other people's passion for Slovenia and Slovenian literature to talk about it. So it's an easy thing.
Well, you don't have to deal with this. So
No. I have to deal with this because actually our success relies completely on this focus. I told you, 60% of all articles from 9,000, 10,000 journalists are written about the guest of honor. Yeah? And then it's not your fault, it's our fault. It's always somebody else's fault.
That's good to hear that we are in the same boat here.
Yeah.
We planned 45 minutes for this talk, so I'm asking, is there any more questions? Yes, Alexander, and then...
Alexander Čobec from Radio Slovenia. You said that it is important that people are talking about us. How much people are talking now about Slovenia? Because it is also important. How do you see it?
I mentioned in a discussion before our meeting here, we talked about how many people really in Germany would know that Ljubljana is in Slovenia. Yeah? I'm not too sure about that. And you see, this book got published recently, a few months ago, yeah? It's called A Manual to Slovenia. This book wouldn't have been published in Germany if it wouldn't have been in the process to move forward to the guest of honor. So, and this is a very prominent German publishing house. So they sell thousands of copies, 10,000 of copies of this probably. Yeah? So what I'm saying, it's slowly starting that people are going to talk about it and to know more about it. And what I said before about asking questions about Slovenia. And one of the most important questions is, why did Frankfurt choose Slovenia? It's a small country. Why the hell? What is unique about? Yeah, because having Spain, yeah, with 500 million people speaking Spanish, and now how many people do speak Slovenian? Worldwide, 2.5, 3 million. 2. Yeah. So why the hell did Germany or Frankfurt decide to choose Slovenia? There must be something special about it. And immediately we get the process going that we talk about Slovenia. Why is it special? Why not have another language?
Okay, thank you. One more question.
Can you hear me? Oh, sure. My name is Jasmin Frelich. I'm an independent author, and I just have like a technical question. We've always been told that in order to engage with a German publisher, you need to have a representation, an agent. So does it make sense for Slovenian authors to seek German representation, or would it be better if we counted on our own, I don't know, in publishing agent representatives?
Actually, that's a long discussion in publishing. Do we need agents? I think Salman Rushdie might need an agent, and he has a wonderful agent with Andrew Wiley, which is called Der Schakal. I don't know what's it in English. Yeah, because he's...
Exactly.
Yeah, so because he's really trying to get a lot of money when he sells the right. But actually it's more about, I think you have to trust your publishers, and what Katja mentioned before, maybe to have a national agency to promote, which actually you have in the Book Institute, yeah? In the book agency, yeah? You have that on the one hand, but it's not a commercial entity. But maybe if some publishers would join forces, yeah, because it's the role of your publisher to sell the rights abroad. And maybe they need more professional training, maybe they need to dare more. Yeah, it's all about pushing the boundaries, and this is very important. So my question is, no, I don't think it would help to have an agent, because then an agent does represent 100 people. So how do you deal with this? Yeah, and it's quite interesting that you see in many languages, the French, by example, they hate to work with agents. Yeah? In the US, it's very different right now. Some roles, usually an editor had to choose and to decide which books I want to publish. They leave it to agents. And some agents leave their work to scouts. So we have a transformation somehow in the industry. Yeah? But again, I would say, no, you don't need an agent, you need a good publisher you trust.
Še kakšno vprašanje? Prvič, drugič, tretjič, končano. Hvala lepa, ker ste bili z nami in se vidimo, če ne prej, na naslednjem knjižnem sejmu, bodisi v Frankfurtu, bodisi v Ljubljani. Hvala.
Oziroma tisti, ki jih bo kaj zanimali še v petek ob 2 na okrogli mizi. Ne?
Hvala lepa.
Danke, Michael. Danke.